this run for the playoffs is so very important for them to continue winning. They have 2 games left after tonight. They have a chance to get into the playoffs after losing Mathew Barzal for the whole second half of the season. Since the All-Star break, Mathew Barzal has not been on the ice. They made a trade for Bo Horvat. They bring in the player to play finally with a Mathew Barzal, a star for a star, playing together on one line. And we only saw it for, 7 games? Mathew Barzal scored 3 or 4 goals in the 7 games. He gave him a boost in Bo Horvat. Lou Lamoriello thought this could be the missing piece. He added Engvall at the trade deadline. He's been pretty good. He's been a pretty decent player on the 3rd line. Their 4th line is healthy. Clutterbuck, who a lot of people thought was not going to play for the rest of the season. Cizikas and Martin, and a goaltender that's going to be up for goalie of the year. He's not going to win it because Olmark has been fantastic, but he has been the 2nd best goalie in the NHL this year in Sorokin. It would be an absolute terrifying thought that the Islanders played so hard at the end of the season, did everything they could to make the playoffs and fall out of the playoffs because of the Penguins or the Florida Panthers and the way they played in the last 10 games of their season.
Yeah, and you look at the Islanders when it comes to the schedule. They have a schedule advantage when it comes to over the Florida Panthers. They have to play 2 very hard teams next week. They got to play the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Carolina Hurricanes, and there might not be an urgency factor for those teams. The Maple Leafs might have locked up the number 2 spot. The Hurricanes maybe will lock up the Metropolitan Division, but the Devils are not far behind. They do have a game in hand, but the Devils are not far behind, so that could make it interesting. The Penguins have 2 easy games towards the end of the year with Chicago and the Blue Jackets, but the Blue Jackets, they just beat the Islanders a couple weeks ago. They've been kind of pesky recently, so who knows? Maybe they help out the Islanders this time. And the Islanders, they're going to have to win one of those tougher games they got towards the end of the year. They just played against Washington, a tough game there, physical game, both teams playing a physical brand of hockey. And you're right, this offensive depth is going to have to continue to play well, regardless of if Barzal comes back or not. Now, he started skating. Does not guarantee he's going to come back in the regular season.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah. All season long, for every single player that's been hurt on this team, they would tell you the problem. They wouldn't give you the exact injury, and then they would be out for 3-4 weeks. Clutterbuck was out for almost 2 months, and everybody said he was out for the season, and now he's back. Why can't we get information? But Lou doesn't really like to give information. We saw that with the Devils for years with Jason Arnott and Claude Lemieux and Bobby Holik. All these guys that we saw, Bill Guerin, when they got hurt, they would give you an upper body injury, a lower body injury, and that's all they would give you. And even if they were out a significant amount of time, you could never get that information out from any of the coaches. So it is crazy that all this time, no answers on why Mathew Barzal has not skated since February.
And you're right, the vagueness of the term lower body injury, definitely not really knowing how severe it really was. But for somebody like Barzal that really relies on his skating and his skill to be able to do so, maybe it would have been harder for him to be able to play at that high level. But you would think that the Islanders in this playoff race would have forced Barzal back a little earlier than that. Luckily, they've been able to weather the storm. They still played well amidst all that. They've been 6-4, really, their last 10 games. They've beaten a couple good teams. They just blew out the Tampa Bay Lightning on Thursday. So
did they ever? But so did the Rangers.
Games. They've won some impactful games that they've needed to, and the Islanders had to need to win a lot of those tough games to fend off these wild card teams. They beat the Penguins a couple weeks ago too, which was big for this current wild card.
They beat the Capitals too.
They beat the Capitals as well. So these are teams that they needed to win, regardless if Barzal was there. And again, that wouldn't have guaranteed anything if he was back. But the Islanders definitely need him if they do make the playoffs for that power play.
The fact that they make the playoffs without him, as long as they didn't have him playing at all in these last couple of weeks, it says a lot about this team and the belief that this team could win without him. And that has a lot to do with Bo Horvat. Yeah, all these guys playing at the top of their game. Defensively, they're starting to figure things out. They're bringing up players like Bolduc. I was there when Bolduc was drafted in a second round a couple of years ago in Vancouver. I thought he was a very, very nice kid, very tall kid. He's played very well in the AHL, and he could be a big part in the future of this organization with the Islanders. They have a lot of good young defensive prospects, not even playing up in the AHL right now. A couple of guys that they drafted last year. So they have an abundance of good defensemen. The question is, do they get enough offense? Could they find enough offense going into this playoff run if they make the playoffs where they can compete against the more elite teams in the NHL?
And again, the age factor too with the Islanders too, being one of the older teams, that experience has helped them too, but again, it's also hurt them when it comes to their offensive depth. And could they rely on that in the playoffs?
They're like the oldest team in the NHL,
especially when it comes to that fourth line. They got that kid Radish who's playing well, but again,
that rest of that team
is really old.